The slap echoed across the market. Everyone turned. "You shameless woman," the man shouted. A crowd gathered instantly, the way crowds always do when there is blood in the water. At the center stood a woman named Sade. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with tears. "What happened?" people asked, pressing in from every direction. "She stole my money," the man declared, his voice loud enough to reach the far end of the market row. Gasps filled the air. Sade shook her head. "I didn't." But before she could finish, the insults began, falling on her like stones. "I knew she was not trustworthy. Look at her face. You can see it in her eyes." The judgment came fast. Too fast. The kind of fast that has nothing to do with truth and everything to do with hunger. The hunger people carry to see someone fall. Sade tried again. "I found the money on the ground. I was only trying to find the owner." "Liar," someone shouted from the back of the crowd. Then a woman emerged from her nearby shop, carrying a full bucket of water. Without a word, without a moment of hesitation, she lifted it and poured the entire contents over Sade's head. The cold water hit her like a second slap. The woman folded her arms with satisfaction. "We must be harsh on thieves," she announced to the crowd. "They have no place here among us." Sade stood dripping, her wrapper soaked and clinging to her skin, her market bag hanging limp in her trembling hand. She raised her eyes slowly and looked at the woman. Her voice, when she finally found it, was quieter than anyone expected. "Mama," she said, "I am only trying to help locate the owner of the money." An old woman described the owner's appearance to me. I was going to use that description to find him. The crowd exchanged glances but did not soften. They had already decided what kind of woman Sade was, and no words from her own mouth were going to undo that. The humiliation did not stop there. It grew, the way fire grows when it finds dry wood. Someone grabbed her bag and searched through it without asking. A young man circled her slowly, shaking his head with theatrical disgust, inviting the crowd to look, to stare, to judge. A market woman a few stalls away began announcing to her customers what was happening, the story already changing shape as it traveled. Thief, bold thief, caught red-handed. Children stopped their errands and gathered at the edges to watch. Sade stood in the middle of it all, soaked, shaking, her dignity stripped in layers like skin from soft fruit. Every time she opened her mouth to speak, voices drowned her out. Every time her eyes found a familiar face in the crowd, that face looked away. To be associated with a thief, even with her innocence, was a risk no one wanted. She told them about the old woman. She described the shop, the exact location, the conversation they'd had when the old woman had pressed the money into her hands and urged her to run after the owner, whose bag had come open without his knowing. She told them everything. They said she was lying. One man, quieter than the rest, finally suggested they settle the matter properly. "Let us take her to this old woman she keeps talking about," he said. "If the woman confirms her story, then we owe her an apology. If not," he let the rest hang in the air. They dragged Sade through the market, some pushing her from behind, some walking alongside and hurling words at her like they were throwing rubbish. The man whose money it was walked with them, righteous and certain, occasionally pointing at Sade and reminding anyone who would listen of his loss. They arrived at the spot Sade had described. The shop was empty. The old woman was not there. Silence fell for exactly 1 second before the crowd erupted again. "There is no old woman. She made up the whole story. Is this not what thieves do? They always have a story." Sade looked at the empty shop and felt something inside her begin to crack. She had brought them here in good faith. She had trusted that truth, laid bare before people, would be enough. She pointed at the mat the old woman had been sitting on, the small wooden table, the arrangement of the space. She was here, right here. This is where she sat. A woman appeared at her side. Before Sade could turn, something wet and rancid hit her from above, spoilt soup, thick and reeking, poured deliberately and slowly over her head. The smell rose up immediately. People around her stepped back and covered their noses, but no one intervened. The woman who had poured it leaned close to Sade's ear. "Thief," she whispered. That was when Sade broke. The tears she had been holding, the ones she had refused to shed in front of these people who had already taken so much from her, came all at once. She wept not from self-pity, but from something far heavier. The sorrow of a person who has done right and been made to feel like the worst kind of wrong. She had touched that money and thought only of its owner. She had gone out of her way, in a busy market on an ordinary afternoon, to do what most people would not have bothered to do. And this was what it had cost her. The crowd around her was no longer interested in her tears. They were interested in something else now. Voices rose, urgent and ugly, agreeing on something. Sade caught the words between her sobs. Disgrace her properly. Make an example. Strip her here so the whole market will see. Hands reached for her. The man whose money it was stepped forward and joined them, grabbing at her arm, pulling, his earlier shout still burning in his chest. They began pushing her toward an open space between the stalls, the kind of open space that in a market becomes a stage. Sade pulled back. She stumbled. No one caught her. Then a voice cut through the noise like a machete through rope. "Leave that girl alone." The crowd stilled. The old woman stood at the entrance of her shop, leaning on a short wooden stick, her eyes moving slowly across the scene before her. Sade's soaked and ruined clothing, the spoilt soup drying on her face, the hands still gripping her arms, the circle of people who had made a spectacle of the afternoon. The old woman walked forward. The crowd parted for her the way crowds part for the very old, out of instinct more than respect. She stopped in front of the man whose money it was and looked at him for a long moment. "I was the one who gave her your money," she said. Her voice was unhurried. "Your bag opened as you walked. The money fell. I am too old to run after a man who cannot hear me calling. So I called this young woman and I described you to her. I put the money in her hands myself. I asked her to return what belongs to you. The market went quiet in the particular way it goes quiet when it has been wrong." The old woman turned to look at the crowd, then at the man, and her eyes carried something that was not quite anger, but was certainly not forgiveness. "She came here into this market to do a good thing," the old woman said slowly. "And this is what you have done to her. You poured water on her. You poured spoilt food on her. You were going to shame her naked in public." She paused. "And you," she pointed at the man with her stick. "You, whose money she was carrying back to you." You held her arm and joined them. No one spoke. Sade stood at the edge of it all, still weeping, her arms wrapped around herself. People began moving toward her with apologies forming on their lips. "We are sorry, we didn't know. Forgive us," reaching for her hands, touching her shoulder. She pulled away from every one of them. She picked up her bag from the ground where someone had dropped it. She straightened her wrapper as best she could. She did not look at the man. She did not look at the woman who had poured the soup, or the one who had poured the water, or the strangers who had called her a liar with such confidence. She walked out of the market the way a person walks when they have learned something about the world they did not want to know, steadily and without looking back.